Hi besties, welcome to my channel. I'm Kitty, and if you're a returning viewer, you get a gold star today. Congratulations. So today's video is actually going to be my botany project, so it might be a little different than what I normally do, but I did want to incorporate wellness back into my channel like I did when I started. I don't really know how to take wellness and LGBT content and put them together, you know what I mean? So today I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of being vegetarian or vegan, and I will also be including a vegetarian holiday recipe. It is my absolute favorite. I came up with it. But before we get started, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe and comment for the algorithm. Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about some pros and cons of being vegetarian or vegan, and then I'm going to include my favorite holiday recipe, which is my own, and it is vegetarian. I mostly cook vegan at home, but sometimes I do enjoy some dairy and eggs. Sometimes it's hard to eat vegetarian when you go to holiday dinners, so you have to try this out. It is so good, I promise you. So some benefits to being vegetarian or vegan is that it is better for your heart health, and it reduces cancer risk. It reduces the amount of growth hormones you're consuming. It also lowers your blood pressure. It can also lower your risk of type 2 diabetes because vegetarian and vegan items are generally on the lower end of the glycemic index, which is how you want to be eating if you are diabetic. Being vegan, not necessarily vegetarian, but being vegan can clear your skin. So if you ever just want to clear your skin up, go vegan. Or at the very least, cut out dairy. The most obvious reason to be vegetarian or vegan is to benefit the animals, of course, but it is also super beneficial for the environment, which is why it's really important to me. As far as the environment goes, being vegetarian or vegan uses less water, so there's less water consumed, but there is a lot of water in dairy production, so do keep in mind that if you are vegetarian and not vegan, that you are still using a lot of water, but you are using less water and less fossil fuels. There are 2.5 times less carbon emissions from being vegetarian versus eating meat. Overall, it reduces global warming effects and minimizes pollution. I personally have been vegetarian since 2015. I did study in Chile over the summer that year, and I wanted to try everything while I was there, but as soon as I came back, I went vegetarian completely, and there was a brief period in my life where I was also vegan. I say vegetarian because people know what I'm talking about, but I'm actually pescatarian. I do still eat fish. So some of this comes from research, but some of it just comes from personal experience and how it's been for me. So now I want to get into the cons. I think the most obvious con is that this is for being vegan, not necessarily being vegetarian, but the most obvious con is that it can be expensive, and that makes it not accessible to everyone. It's not that the vegetables and produce and such are more expensive, it's that if you get the vegan replacements, so food that is going to be quick to eat generally, is really expensive. So that leads more people to having to cook all of their food if they're vegan and they can't afford those replacements, which means you need more time. This overall just has a lack of accessibility in being vegan and sometimes even vegetarian. It's definitely easier to be vegan if you live in a really big city such as LA or New York. Here in Little Rock, unfortunately, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. It can be really hard to get some vegan food when you go out to eat though, which is part of the reason that I am vegetarian. That way I generally cook vegan at home, and when I go out to eat, I eat vegetarian because being vegan at a restaurant is hard. And like I said earlier, that means people have to cook more of their own food when they're vegan if they live in a smaller town that doesn't have those kind of options, or if they simply can't afford those kind of options. Unfortunately, across America, we do have food deserts, which absolutely blows my mind that in a country this wealthy, this even exists. So people who live in food deserts probably can't be vegan and possibly not even vegetarian. Now this one won't affect everyone, but for me, one con to being vegetarian or vegan is that a lot of the replacements are made from soy, and I am intolerant to soy. It's not super uncommon, so there are a lot of people that do have a soy intolerance, which makes being vegan harder for sure. It's also not necessarily good to eat a ton of soy. You do want to keep it in moderation like everything else. Also tying into that is nuts are often used in vegan foods. Nuts can be used as like make a cheese sauce out of nuts. It's used in a lot of vegan options, and unfortunately there's a lot of people who have non-functioning gallbladders like myself and can't digest fats, so that is something that I wouldn't be able to eat. So I can't eat that vegan cheese sauce, and also that making cheese sauce from nuts is really, really expensive. Another con of being vegan or vegetarian is that you don't necessarily get all of your vitamins, particularly B12. But you can take that, get it over the counter, no big deal. Now, overall, pretty much everything I talked about as far as cons go tie into this, but I want to talk about sustainability. Being vegan or vegetarian isn't sustainable for everyone for those reasons of like inaccessibility, or they have intolerances, or they can't digest something, or they can't afford it. Those are all reasons that it may not be sustainable for everyone. An important point to make is that everyone being plant-based imperfectly does a lot more change than a very few people being vegan perfectly. In my opinion, as long as someone is trying to limit their meat and dairy consumption, they're doing great. That is another con to the vegan community. Not necessarily being vegan, but the community is known to not acknowledge inaccessibility and sustainability, and they can be known to be very judgmental and condescending. So I think everyone should do some kind of plant-based diet in my personal opinion, but I'm not going to go around shaming people because that doesn't really get us anywhere. I think it's more important to encourage people who are making those little changes because they add up and they do lead to even bigger changes. Oftentimes people will cut out red meat and then next thing you know they're vegetarian and then vegan, and any way you do it is okay. And I think even if you're just having meatless Mondays, that's awesome. That's all I have for the pros and cons. Now I'm going to get into the recipe. I am using dairy, which isn't the best, but I am choosing to use goat cheese, which is on the lower end of the glycemic index. The only cheeses that are considered low on the glycemic index are feta and goat cheese. As long as it's on the low end of the... My cats are just going insane. I'd say if it's on the low end of the glycemic index, it's always healthy. I wouldn't consider this a recipe to be too guilty about. However, I am using pesto that I didn't make myself, which is going to have, Parmesan. But this recipe is warm and cozy and perfect for fall and winter, and I hope you enjoy. The first thing I did was preheat the oven to 400 degrees, and then I chopped up the biggest sweet potato I could find. Butternut squash works as well, however those are pretty hard to cut up. I tossed the sweet potatoes with some olive oil, pink Himalayan salt, black pepper, and turmeric. I didn't actually measure anything, I just shake it on top. Then you're ready to pour it over a sheet pan and put it in the oven for 15 minutes. Then I started 1 cup of quinoa and cooked it as normal. Then take an entire bunch of kale and wash it and massage it. Don't forget to massage your kale, that's one of the most important steps. So then the sweet potatoes were ready to be flipped, and then I put them back in the oven for another 15 minutes. I don't have this next step filmed, but I took an entire can of beets and diced them up. Then I sauteed the kale. I used olive oil, but you can use whatever you'd like. And then once it starts to shrink a little bit, you add pink Himalayan salt and black pepper and turmeric. Then I added the beets and I seasoned them the same way. Here I add about 2 ounces of goat cheese and let that melt down. Once the quinoa is getting close to done, I added half of a small jar of pesto. I took the sweet potatoes out of the oven and added them to the veggie mix, and once the quinoa is done, you are finished. Here is the final product, and enjoy! Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe. Comment for the algorithm. Comment your favorite holiday food. Thank you guys, and I will see you next time.